but it was a tough upbringing. We were burgled by our neighbours, receiving racial abuse. My mum and dad's car would be like lit on fire.
Today I'm joined by Manchester City legend Nedum Onuoha. A man whose story is not just about football, but about strength, perspective, leadership, and the moments that shape who we all become.
I give off this air of like real confidence and calm, but it's because I like to be logical with things. But when logic leaves the room, I do feel lost. And one of the downsides of that is that football, for the most part, doesn't really carry much logic to it. If you train well, you play on Saturday. What happens if you train well, you don't? All of a sudden, it's like, okay, you have to commit to do the very best that you can. Because when you learn those lessons yourself, I think you hold on to them a bit more instead of being told that you're doing wrong. In the first half, my mother was alive. In the second half, she wasn't. She understood me more than sort of anybody else on planet Earth. Like, my mum never got a chance to see my children. Like, for me, it's heartbreaking. Yeah, in some ways I do still struggle now, but as is the case with everybody, you do the best that you can in the situations that you find yourself in. Trying to be a positive role model and trying to bring like joy to people's lives, for me is a big thing, which she was a part of. I fell out of the team and almost out of the squad altogether, and I was probably one of the only people at that time. Like, I was having sleepless nights because it was the first time in my career where I wasn't playing and I didn't know why.
Who would you say, from a management perspective, is someone that you feel has really set the standard? Give me a name, give me a name.
Forward.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here. This is, as you just said, it's the first ever for us. And today, hopefully, is not just going to be an interview, but it will be an experience. And I say that because we try on our podcast to go beyond headlines, beyond the job titles, to delve a little bit deeper, pardoning the pun, into the mindset of our guests and also the meaning that shapes them as a person and as a character. That's what the podcast is about. It's about growth. And I believe that when you listen to people's stories, you learn something about yourself. So I'm hoping that will come through for you today. So you're not just an audience today. You are part of the episode, because for the first time ever, you're actually providing us with live energy, with real-time reactions, hoping they're going to be good ones, and also like real emotion. So, and along that way, I really hope that you will find a way to delve deep and think more deeply about your life journey through listening to Nedum. Welcome, Nedum, to the show. What I'm just going to let you know is we have a singing bowl here. This is a typical format of the podcast, and there are words placed in the bowl. And Nedum will, at random, pick up any one of those words, and then we will talk. So what I'm trying to tell you is we have no idea where this conversation is technically going to go. So we're all in the same boat. I'm going to hand over to Lily just to count us in and to get started on the podcast. Welcome to the Think Deepa podcast. Today, I'm joined by Manchester City legend Nedum Onuoha, a man whose story is not just about football, but about strength, perspective, leadership, and the moments that shape who we all become. Through one word at a time, we're going beyond the badge and into the lessons beneath it. Welcome to the show, Nedum.
Thank you.
If you could please first pick your
Pick my first word.
Pick your first word.
Okay, here we go.
You're giving it a good shuffle there.
I have. Sorry, I'm used to doing draws. Apologies. So the first word is actually city.
Wow. Okay. Great word, really.
I would agree.
Yeah. Well, it depends what we're talking about. If we're talking about Manchester, definitely. Talking about City, you for sure. Just you debuted at 17, 2004. They say that Manchester kind of builds people before it celebrates them. What would you say that Manchester as a city and Manchester City has given you in terms of grit, becoming and then belonging?
That's a really good question. And I think from my side of things, it begins with the fact that, say, I wasn't born in England. I wasn't born in Manchester. I was actually born in Nigeria, and I came over to England when I was 6 years old. And we actually moved to Miles Platting, which is, as we can see now, a stone's throws away from the Etihad Stadium.
It was meant to be.
Don't know about that. But during that time, our family, so it's myself, my three sisters, my two parents, they were working extra long hours. We were doing the best that we could. We were very much a Nigerian household within Manchester. And that was fine because that's all we're used to. But as many people know now, for as much as say the city's been regenerated, that part of Manchester, it isn't great now, but it wasn't great back then. Thankfully, it is starting to get better, but it was a tough upbringing, not necessarily because of the things that we had to do as a family, but the things which we saw.
Which was like what?
Which is like we were, for example, we were burgled by our neighbours. We were receiving racial abuse. My mum and dad's car would be like lit on fire and things like this. You know, they were struggling to find work, especially my mum, who had a PhD in environmental sciences. So that's Dr. Antonia Onuoha. She was being told that she's overqualified for work. So there were struggles like this. My dad was working 2 jobs, but we, as I say, were doing the best that we could. But in that time, we were still a Nigerian family living in Manchester. As time passed, and some of it's to do with when I joined Man City when I was 10 years old after playing locally for AFC Clayton, I remember going to Main Road, being a ball boy, seeing people come together, seeing the history of it all, seeing what it meant to the city, to the community, and start to see what the city of Manchester really kind of was through identity, because identity is a big part of, you know, of everyone's life. And for all of a sudden I started to see what it was to be a Mancunian. I started to not necessarily attach myself to it, but I understood it more. I was a bigger part of it. My friends were very much for it, and I was part of this group of people.
So you felt like you belonged?
I felt there was something I could belong to. It wasn't necessarily always the case whereby, as I say, I was fully welcome, but as time passed, more and more people did start to take me on board. So from joining the academy from 10 years of age, before you know it, like some of the people I joined the academy with when I was 10, they're still some of my closest friends to this day as I approach 40 very slowly.
Aging gracefully.
Very slowly, very, very slowly towards 40 this year. But yeah, that became part of who I was. And even to this day, like I'm still very much a proud Nigerian, but I also feel like a proud Manc as well. And I understand how both things work and who I am within those spaces. And if anyone asks me where I'm from, I'll say those 2 things.
And I can absolutely relate to that, being an Indian and having the same kind of challenges. So I totally understand.
100%,
you know.
yeah.
Did you think that's what then shaped you into who you became as a defender on the pitch? You're kind of taking some of that aggression out.
It's not necessarily aggression. I was very cautious on and off. I think for the way that the city is, and it's interesting because in the last part of my career, I moved to play in Utah, and that's known as the Beehive State, because it's a sort of story about the nature of the people there, really hardworking, humble people, you know, part of a community together, trying to pull in the same direction. And then here's the connection to Manchester with the worker bees as well. And I think for the most part, for as much as, you know, we can talk about football and the successes of, say, both of the major football clubs there in United and City, they still want it to look a certain way, which is people showing full-blooded commitment to what they want to try and achieve and doing it together. And that's never changed regardless of the success. So to go back to when I first played, so I was lucky enough to ball boy at Main Road. I played in some academy games at Main Road, but then to see the new stadium, see the change. But still, some of the highlights that I've had for as much as we won big games and key moments. I remember one time on the East Stand, making a tackle against someone. It got the biggest cheer the whole day because I was this 18-year-old coming through the academy, you know, and having that fight and desire which represented the people.
Love that.
So in the early 2000s, like that's perfectly acceptable. These days, it's probably a red card. However, the point still remains that for as nice as the football can be, the people of the city, in my opinion, still want to see passion, desire, and drive and togetherness. And
that's the Mancunian spirit.
Exactly, and that's the way it has been, the way it always will be. Number 2.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hope this doesn't say United. Let's have a look. Afterlight.
Afterlight. So this for me is about you coming out of football, really. You've had an identity. People know you for playing football. You know yourself for that time, but your routine changes. This relates to business as well, I guess, for people that might be considering retirement or that might be going into pivoting their business. But what was the talk around that time when you knew that you were going to retire and become something and somebody different, essentially?
So I was quite fortunate in some ways because I was privileged to know when I was going to retire years before it happened. I think there are tons of people within my industry who get told that they're not of use anymore. And I think psychologically that can be very hard for them to receive, especially because they spent their whole life doing this thing. And
it's their love, isn't it?
It's their love, and it's all they've been essentially trained to do. But for myself, I've always tried to be somebody who sees the bigger picture. and somebody who, even, for example, 2 years into my career, based on like my father in particular, had I made it yet? I was still doing my levels when I was playing in the Premier League, to the stress of a lot of people in my team who would sometimes try and light my school bag on fire and things like that. But that's a whole different conversation. And so I left Man City in 2012 permanently, and I went to QPR. And at that time, the space I was in the locker room was one where I was surrounded by older players, even though I was in my mid to late 20s. And they were all talking about the end. So from when I was 26 or 27 years of age, I started planning financially towards the end of my career, even though I'd not even reached the peak of it yet. So financially, I was getting ready for that. And then emotionally as well, this was in the early 2010s, you could see how football was changing. There was like the globalization of the Premier League and so on, and the attachments to things like social media and the like. And I was deciding from very early that some of the shiny things around it, I wasn't really interested in. So I lived my life and played my career as if I went to football. I loved playing football, but when it was done, I went home and I just lived a normal life.
Great.
If someone was to, if I ever introduced myself to somebody, I'd say I'm Nedum. I wouldn't say I'm Nedum that plays football. If they happen to know that's who I am, then we can talk about that if they want. But that's not my identity.
It wasn't your identity, yeah.
So my identity was one which I knew was going to stand the test of time. So then in 2018, I got a chance to go to the US. And in doing so, I knew my contract was 2.5 years. And I said, when that contract's over, I said this to my wife, and with my young kids, I said, I'd like to come home and start the rest of my life, because that was the difference for me in terms of the privilege.
Yeah.
Because as I was younger, I loved training and I loved games. I loved everything about football. The more of it you play, the more you start to love certain things more than others. So I went to a point where I loved the variability of training. Then as I had my children, I loved days off so I could spend time with my family. That became like a bigger thing to me. Not that I wasn't doing my work well, because I was, but that was more important. So now I'm looking forward to, in some ways, to retirement, because that's the start of the rest of my life. So whereas for other people, it's the end of everything that they've known.
Yes.
For me, there's the beginning of something which could be very, very exciting. So I retired. I remember the feeling of like, I only played one game with an orange ball in my whole career because of the snow. This is the very last game I played. Absolute blizzard in Utah. This game was a ridiculous game of football. But I remember walking off the pitch at the end of that game, feeling proud that I've done what I've done to this point. And the next chapter is something which I'm really excited about. Fast forward 6 years, I'm very privileged to work for the BBC, ESPN, do some stuff for Man City. I've done podcasts galore. I've done so much within the world of football, but my identity still remains the same, to where that's the work that I do, but when I'm not doing it, I'm still exactly the same person.
To be fair, I've known you for a very long time and you have not changed at all. So, and that adaptability, I think, is really, really important. And the foresight, I guess, just to start to plan ahead and think about how you'll pivot when you need to.
100%. Like I want to do the best job that I can, but I also want to like enjoy my life and to get a chance to see my kids grow now instead of doing something full time, like in football. For me, that's perfect.
Love that.
I'll put that one down because it's blank.
It's just to test you.
Yes, of course. Armour.
So it's quite interesting for me, because on the outside, people would, being a centre-back for Manchester City, particularly, part of your career, it's all about strength and discipline and like an unshakable spirit. Although you're very calm and very composed, there is the element of you being very strong and I just wonder, were there moments where on the exterior we would see the strength, whether that be on the pitch or in your home life or even within business, but actually you were in complete survival mode?
Yeah, that's happened loads of times in my life. And some of it's to do with football, some of it's to do with just general life. The football side of things is you have to, or you had to previously, give off this illusion like everything was okay. Because from in the early 2000s and earlier than that, if you were seen at all to even be close to something defined as mentally weak, then people wouldn't trust you, an opportunity would disappear. But there were times, for example, when Roberto Mancini came in at Man City, and obviously he's a hugely successful manager for them, but I fell out of the team and almost out of the squad altogether. And I was probably one of the only people at that time. Like I was having sleepless nights because it was the first time in my career where I wasn't playing and I didn't know why. And he wasn't somebody who was great at giving feedback. And feedback for me is, something that can say, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do instead. Like something I learned from very early on is from football side of things, like, you know what you want, but sometimes to achieve it, you've got to ask a question in a certain way. So instead of asking a manager, like, why am I not playing? You'd be like, what do I need to do to get into this team? Because then if they give you an answer and you work at it, then you put them in a position to where they kind of have to select you if they're going to be seen as honest. But with Roberto, he never gave any feedback whatsoever. And I found that really, really tough. And because City was my club in my city, for everyone else that come and were struggling, they were ready to go elsewhere. For me, I never thought about leaving City. But now all of a sudden I had to think about that wholeheartedly, which I wasn't ready for. But in that dressing room, I didn't feel I could turn to anybody and talk about it. And in that time, based on that, a few years later when I was captain of QPR, I made sure that everybody in the dressing room felt like they had a voice and could speak to me. Because back when I needed to speak to somebody, there was nobody I could speak to. The other side is, so my career is basically split in half, from where in the first half, my mother was alive, and the second half, she wasn't. Because before she passed in 2012, she'd been to every game of football I'd ever played in, from me as a 7, 8-year-old to me, to when she passed when I was like 26, 27. And from when she passed, it never felt the same again.
In what way?
In the way that I'd shared every one of those moments with her. I could have been playing a 21s game in Bulgaria or playing a reserve game in Hyde. She was always going to be there. She'd always find a way to be there, and so we could speak about things, and she understood me more than sort of anybody else on planet Earth. And she was somebody that I could fall back on. But in the last 2 years of her life, she was suffering with cancer, and suffering quite badly. And you could see how it was affecting her and everyone around her in the orbit. You don't realize in some ways how important somebody is until they can't do things the same way anymore.
Yeah.
And from after she passed, everything that was held together so beautifully, all of a sudden, it wasn't as natural for other people to fill that void, myself included. And I think in some ways I've tried to be a rock for my family and my sisters, my father, extended family, for my wife now, for my kids. But I've still not gotten over the time that she passed, because to this day, like, knowing, for example, that my mum never got a chance to see my children, like, for me, it's heartbreaking. But I can't show heartbreak as I try and raise my kids and try and tell them about this woman who meant everything to me, who they'll never be able to get a feel for. So, yeah, in some ways I do still struggle now, but as is the case with everybody, you do the best that you can in the situations that you find yourself in.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing.
No problem. Oh, here we go. Compass.
And it's a great segue for me, because you know, you've navigated lots of different roles as a father, as a brother, as a son. You've worked within football, you've gone into punditry, you're podcasting, you're an ambassador for Man City, as you've alluded just earlier. Was your mum your compass then?
Yeah, I think.
Did she always bring you back to reminding you who you actually are?
Yeah, I think so. I think she was a brilliant human being for me, like probably the best human being I've ever come across in my lifetime. But maybe I am biased, and she's my mother.
Well, what were the qualities though? So for people that are fortunate enough to have a compass to kind of anchor them down, they'll know what that means. But let's say there are people here that don't necessarily have that. What was it about your mum that?
So with my mum, she was really, really thoughtful, really caring, especially to those around her that, like, you know, that she loved and loved her back. But she was also incredibly fair. And when she needed to be stronger, she would be stronger, but she wouldn't lead with that. She would almost, the way that I would see it, like, say, for anybody that drives, very rarely you're on a perfectly straight road. So without realizing, you make lots of tiny adjustments as you travel up that road. And my mum was brilliant for doing that. Never was it like a big sweeping turn to try and get you back on the path. She could always notice when something subtle needed to be done and something subtle needed to be changed. And she'd always try and give you that lesson in a way whereby she wasn't telling you exactly what you needed to, exactly what's going on, but allowed you to learn about it. Because when you learn those lessons yourself, I think you hold on to them a bit more instead of being told that you're doing wrong. And she was brilliant for that. And I think as I've moved forward in my life, like, being able to be fortunate enough to be a father of like three young children who I obviously love to bits, it's great to see them, like, see the world in such a pure way. But then also you realize through life, whatever age you are, I don't think there are many people that ever think that they don't know enough, because in that moment, you know everything, this is it. So the way I think about this is the way it should be. And I think trying to show to young people that that's not necessarily the case without telling them they're wrong I think that's a skill that I picked up from my mother. And I'm, obviously most people, everyone thinks they're a good person, but I believe in like universal human rights, and I try and live my life through that way, whether it's through work, life, meeting people and so on, and being a positive person, trying to be a positive role model and trying to bring like joy to people's lives for me is a big thing which she was a part of. And, you know, even for all the people that didn't necessarily know or meet her loads of times, so many people after she passed would talk to me about the time that they did meet her, what it meant to meet her in that moment.
So it seems like you've become the compass for a lot of your extended family and your kids and that, which I'm sure your mum is really, really proud of.
Yeah, I'm sure she would be. Like we had a brilliant relationship, and to be honest, I do still like to just focus in on like family, you know, my friends. I'll give them absolutely everything. But I think for most people that will meet me, you'll end up leaving with a positive experience, because I do see the value in like kindness over, as I say, hostility.
I definitely second that, because I know that is what you're completely about.
Yes. Echo.
So we've kind of touched on this a little bit with your mom, really. Were there moments where you ever questioned kind of where you were going in life in terms of what you had learned, where you needed to rethink how you were moving?
Yeah. There would have been lots of times, just because like I give off this air of like real confidence and calm, but it's because I like to be logical with things. But when logic leaves the room, I do feel lost. And one of the downsides of that is that football, for the most part, doesn't really carry much logic to it. You know, we sort of frame the world of football like, oh, you've got training this week. If you train well, you play on Saturday. What happens if you train well, you don't? All of a sudden, it's like, okay. So that was 1 week. I'm sure the next week will be better. So you train really hard again, then you don't do it.
What's your self-talk then, though? Because obviously that goes a certain way, doesn't it? And then you're kind of like, I just can't. How do I keep doing this?
Throughout my career, so I played for 16 years, and there must have been a total of about 5 training sessions which I decided I'm going to try and make a point and not try in these sessions. And it lasted about 10 minutes because I was like, I can't do this. I don't know how to.
Yeah.
Because for the position I play and the person that I am, if I don't try, it's easier to notice because it affects everybody. And I don't want to be the reason for something going in the wrong direction. And I want to be as good a professional as I can be. And I think I realized over time through learning about the game, and for me, learning about the environment, the industry, like you can never learn enough. Sometimes you learn lessons the hard way, but to be inquisitive is actually like a strength as opposed to a weakness, because the world is changing every single year, every day. If you still have the same belief that you had 10, 15 years ago with a different group of people who are now in this space, then you're missing the point. So what I learned in terms of the training thing is that if you're ever on the outside, more eyes are on you to see if you'll do something wrong. Because then if you do something wrong, then it's justified that you're on the outside. So for your own peace of mind, you have to commit to do the very best that you can. If it doesn't go your way, you have to have a belief that there'll be an opportunity. But if you decide to throw your toys out the pram, then the opportunity might never come back. But you have to learn that the hard way.
You had moments of that though, didn't you?
Toys out the pram. I think so. Most of the people I've played with in my career, I'd probably say 99% of people like would say really positive things about me. The 1% probably wouldn't, but I do deem them to be villains. So, in fairness, I would say no, not you. I would say the 1% that see me in a different light, I think it's justified because they were negative influences on the people around me, not just my teammates. I'm talking staff, I'm talking fans, I'm talking everything. And I'm somebody who doesn't sit well with injustice. So yeah, some people have seen another side to me.
Let's pick the final piece of paper.
Standard,
great one. All about leadership, which for me is not something that's very loud. It's something that is about setting a standard. It's about living by example. It's about what you pass on maybe to your children or, you know, within a business infrastructure. Just quickly tell me, within football, and I suppose outside of that, a bit in media, who would you say from a management perspective is someone that you feel has really set the standard? Because you already gave us an example of something you did within your team, but just who would you say is inspirational in terms of like setting that standard that business owners can look to in terms of leadership?
It's a good question. I can't necessarily specifically mention someone, especially within the world of football, just because every club has different resources and different beliefs. Like a measure of success is like, say, for example, Man City in the moment in second, we perceive to be having a worse season than Brentford in sixth. But from just a pure data standpoint, obviously City are having the better season. So how you lead that can be really interesting. But I think what I like.
Give me a name. Give me a name. Give me a name.
Don't know if I genuinely don't know if I can. But what I would say is anybody who within business and within, say, the industry that I'm in, understands that one size fits all does not fit for anyone anymore in this day and age. I think an understanding of your workforce is the way to find that extra 1% across many people. And if you find that, you'll have people who thrive in the space that they're in, want to be there, want to work hard for not just themselves, and are looking to try and take this collective vision to the next space, as opposed to people who say, this is how it has to be, because then you might get one or two people on board, but to go in the right direction, you need everybody.
Very diplomatic answer, but I love it. You've been in media long enough, I think you've been trained. So this is exactly why we have these conversations. And because when someone does honestly share a story, as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't just tell us who they are, but it reveals something about who we are as well. So I would now love to invite you all just for a minute, just to reflect on Nedum's story and think about what that's mirrored inside of you and in terms of your life journey. And then I'd like to open the floor out to any questions, if anybody's got any for Nedum. Amazing. Thank you so much, everybody. We hope you enjoyed it. And I'm going to hand over back to you. Thank you.